radio is broadcast on LSL Podcast Channel. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the channel.
So far, we don't really know anything except indictments handed down against Paul Manafort, former campaign chairman of the Trump campaign, and his deputy, as you heard, Rick Gates. Mueller's team will likely release the contents of that indictment in a few hours. We'll bring it to you as we get it here on the Laura Ingraham Show. But I will tell you right now, anyone who's claiming that they know much about this before you read the actual indictments have no idea what they're saying.
A Mueller spokesman is saying Manafort and Gates will each face 12 charges, including conspiracy against the United States. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that these are tax fraud-related indictments, part of it anyway. But that's all we know right now. This is breaking.
The Democrats have put all their marbles on the Bob Mueller team. The Democrats have, from the very beginning, a year ago, when Donald Trump was elected, believed that they could undo the results of the election. Their goal, from the moment that Trump hit the magic electoral number, their goal was to remove Donald Trump from office. The appointment of the special prosecutor, which never should have been done, and a regular prosecutor could have figured this out. You don't need a special prosecutor to figure out tax fraud. I mean, tax fraud, they prosecute tax fraud all the time in the United States. Mail fraud, tax fraud, conspiracy to divert money from U.S. coffers. This is run-of-the-mill stuff that any good federal prosecutor with some researchers and other assistant prosecutors could discover. You don't need a special prosecutor for this. And they have the temerity to argue, and until we see otherwise, we're going to describe it this way. They have the temerity to argue that this is somehow evidence of a potential or actual collusion with Russia, because Paul Manafort, who has been a political consultant for 35 years, engaged in financial transactions that predated his time as campaign manager, and I guess use that to tie that to Donald Trump?
In the indictment, it contends that $75 million flowed through offshore accounts tied to Manafort. He is being charged with conspiracy against the U.S., money laundering, and other charges.
It's typical. It is
open now.
Yeah, these are the typical federal charges in a case like this where these types of facts are involved. So you have a situation where Bob Mueller he's populated his office with 15 lawyers. They have unlimited budget, and what they've come up with is Paul Manafort was running money through an outside account that was really his account, and that money should have been counted toward his income tax gross income, and it wasn't.
The key for the most substantive indictment would be any indictment that has a clear path to the Trump campaign or Trump himself, as opposed to collateral violations. Manafort is viewed as something of a target-rich environment. There's a lot of transactions there unrelated to the campaign that he might be subject to investigation or even charge.
Money laundering that took place before Paul Manafort was the chairman of the Trump campaign. That is the allegation. Now, we'll see when we get is the actual indictment been handed down? It just was handed down.
Just was released.
Okay, so it's just been handed down. When it's printed out for me, I'll be able to actually go through it as a lawyer, but I can't do it when it's not in front of me.
12-count indictment, conspiracy against U.S. and to launder money, FARA violations, F-A-R-A violations, false statements, and 7 counts of failure to file foreign money reports. So this is all about the foreign accounts.
This all predates Trump. I mean, unless I'm going to see something else, this all predates Donald Trump. This is something that could be investigated and prosecuted by any U.S. attorney's office. And the fact that they didn't discover this evidence before he became a part of the Trump campaign is frankly just revealing of the Justice Department. I mean, why didn't they discover this before? Why are they just discovering it now? So I'm not saying this is good for Trump. It's not good for Trump. It's not good for Trump to have a former campaign manager and his deputy be indicted. That's not good. Anyone who tells you that's good, but it also isn't Russian collusion. On the surface, to people who don't follow this and who don't understand what the federal criminal law is all about, they will say, oh, Donald Trump's campaign manager was indicted. It must be Donald Trump. No, that's not how it works. But the media and their sloppy reporting and their jumping the gun to say that this amounts or could amount to collusion between Russia and Trump because he was the campaign chairman? What he's been representing these foreign interests for 3+ decades, since the late 70s, longer than that. It was Black, Manafort, Stone, and Atwater. That was the name of the firm originally. They were young guns running around Washington, representing a lot of different candidates. And then Manafort broke off, and Manafort did his own firm. And the idea that this should occupy the time and the energy of this administration in any way, given what I know now, it's even more ridiculous. Paul Manafort is going to have to answer these questions. He's going to have to defend himself against these charges. I have no idea where that's going to go. But it is really quite something for the American media. And Andrea Mitchell was huffing and puffing about this on MSNBC this morning before she had even read an indictment. For the media to try to tag Trump with this is appalling. Tonight, the Ingraham angle debuts. Our special guest, General John Kelly, will join us. He is one of the most fascinating people that we've gotten to know as a country over the last really 10 months since he was DHS secretary. Before that, he was head of the Southern Command. And he worked as the chief aide to the Secretary of Defense in the Obama years. And he's chief of staff at Trump. I mean, he sees everyone come in and out of that office. He was brought in to instill some type of process at the White House. Has it been successful? What are his feelings about this job now? And what's the president like? What is he like as a leader? You know, John Kelly was a respected leader of men and women in the military. And he's trained leaders. What kind of a leader is Donald Trump? We're going to ask him all these questions tonight. You are not going to want to miss this interview. I'm really looking forward to it. Other special guests, of course, we're going to be talking to Mike Mukasey, Judge Mike Mukasey, who is former Attorney General of the United States, who will be giving us his take on this indictment. So you can't get better than that. Former AG and John Kelly, the first show. And other surprise special guests for later on in the week. I'm really excited. And remember, this show is, has my name on it, but it is your show. The issues you care about, the questions you want answered, and we're going to be trying to pull the curtain back on the issues that either go unreported or misreported, both in politics and the culture. So that's what our charge is. That's what we're going to do. We take it very seriously and are also going to have a good time. The pursuit of happiness. I'm going to try to pursue that on this show every once in a while. But we're going to take a break. 855-40-LAURA, former federal prosecutor, investigator Saul Weisenberg is going to join us. Can't wait to have his take on this. He's just reading this indictment, as are we. As breaking news, this is a great day to debut a show, and I'm very gratified. I'm humbled, extremely grateful for this opportunity. I can't wait for you all to tune in. And you can tell me what you want me to talk about. If you want to chime in this hour and tell me what you want to talk about on this show, on the show tonight on Fox, then I'm happy to hear from you. 855-40-LAURA. You've heard me go on and on about my favorite game. It's called Say Anything. That's because it's so much fun. You just sit around the table and you ask a question, and everyone who's playing just starts talking, laughing, sharing stories. There's no complicated rules. It basically is just everyone sharing their opinions. I love it. Everyone in the family can play together because Say Anything is great for all ages. And when you play, you actually connect with people around the table. I've learned so many things about my family just playing the game, and I love it. Say Anything is the best party game we've ever played at the Ingraham household. It's a gift that brings families together. Remember, I'm not just talking about being around the table in the same room, but actually talking with each other, really connecting. You can get Say Anything at Target, and I've just heard that Target is running some kind of free game promotion. So if you buy a certain number of games, you get a game for free. So go to your local Target for all the details, because now might be a great time to get Say Anything for free. Everyone in the family can play together.
Say Anything is great for all ages. That's Say Anything, available at Target. Say Anything.
Let me ask you this. If your car broke down today, can you actually afford the repairs? Well, listen, I got extended vehicle service protection from CarShield. Sure, something like replacing your engine, that can cost thousands of dollars. But never when you expect it happening to you. Forget it. I don't want any part of this. So get covered by CarShield, the ultimate in extended vehicle service protection. And CarShield can cover practically everything, by the way, mechanical repairs, your car's computer, GPS, electronics, and then you can have your favorite mechanic or your dealership do the work. CarShield gets the mechanic paid directly. You don't have to worry about being reimbursed. So sign up today and get that VIP treatment from CarShield's administrators, 24/7 roadside and a rental while yours is in the shop. Get covered by CarShield like I did. Just go to carshield.com, use the code Laura, or call them at 800-CAR-6100. That's 800-CAR-6100. So just moments ago, the indictment against Paul Manafort and his associate, Mr. Gates, has been handed down, and we're reading it as we're getting it. Richard Gates III. They were political consultants and lobbyists. Joining us now, I'm delighted he's with us. Saul Weisenberg, who's a white-collar criminal defense attorney in D.C. He was deputy independent counsel, number 2 position during Whitewater Lewinsky, and he was selected by Starr to conduct the grand jury questioning of Bill Clinton all those years ago. No one better than Saul. Saul, great to have you with us. How are you?
Thanks. Great to be here.
Saul, have you had a chance to glance over the indictment? And so far, I don't see any connection to the campaign or Russia collusion.
I apologize. I have not. It's trying to get it on the internet has been difficult since it just came down. So I understand it's a tax fraud indictment, and I'd be very surprised if it had anything to do with the main accusations. I assume, you can tell me, I assume that it has to do with failure to report a foreign account. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's basically a number of transactions that are unrelated to the campaign. Payments he received from his consulting work in Ukraine, for Ukraine political parties, the government of Ukraine, and various when the Department of Justice sent inquiries to Manafort and Gates in 2016 about their activities, Manafort and Gates responded with a series of false and misleading statements. So they're false statements, claims, tax fraud, mail fraud, failure to register as a foreign agent, that kind of thing. It's only about 4 pages, or 3.5 pages, actually.
Well, that's kind of classic in this situation. If you're trying to flip people and pressure people to go against higher-ups, you get them for whatever you can get them for. So nothing unusual or inherently improper about this on the part of Mueller's team. On the other hand, as you point out, nothing that directly relates to why he was appointed in the first place.
Between at least 2006 and 2015, Manafort and Gates acted as unregistered agents for the government of Ukraine, the Party of Regions, which is a Ukrainian political party whose leader, Viktor Yanukovych, was president from 2010 to 2014. Yanukovych, the opposition bloc, etc. Manafort and Gates generated tens of millions of dollars in income as a result of their Ukraine work in order to hide Ukraine payments from U.S. authorities from approximately 2006 through at least 2016. Manafort and Gates laundered the money through scores of U.S. and foreign corporations, partnerships, and bank accounts. And so they funneled the millions of dollars into foreign nominee companies and opened them up and opened by them and their accomplices in nominee names in various foreign countries. They list some of the countries that were involved, Saul. And they hid the existence of foreign companies and bank accounts, falsely and repeatedly reporting to their tax preparers and to the United States that they had no foreign bank accounts.
Right. So that's one of the classic examples of alleged tax fraud, and tax fraud is failing to report a foreign account. It's how people hide money. Of course, he's presumed innocent until proven guilty. And this is a classic white-collar indictment, but again, from what you're telling me, no connection to any conspiracy or alleged conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia. Doesn't mean that it's wrong for Mueller to have indicted him or that it's outside of Mueller's authority. It just means that it really doesn't speak to the allegations against Trump.
No, and we're almost out of time, Saul, but also I think this could have been discovered by any prosecutor. You don't need a special prosecutor for this type of activity. This, as you said, this is classic white-collar crime of hiding income. I mean, we've seen this, for as long as we've been around as a country. People hiding income from the government.
You absolutely don't need a special prosecutor for that, but it probably wouldn't have been looked at if Mueller's people were not looking at the collusion allegation. And his charter is so broad that he was given that he's allowed to look at anything directly arising from his investigation. That's very, very broad.
So you think they're trying to? You think they're trying to squeeze Gates and him in order to get to give something up on Donald Trump? Is that the classic tactic?
Absolutely. But whether or not they're trying to do that, if they run across a fraud that they think is important enough, they're going to indict it. But yeah, absolutely, that's the thing you do. And there's, fortunately or unfortunately, there's nothing wrong with that as long as when you do it, you don't engage in improper conduct or improper tactics. We've spoken before, not you and I, but people have spoken about the morning raid, the no-knock raid on Manafort's house. Or his residence. I'll be very interested at the end of the day to find out what Mueller's people told the federal magistrate to be able to do that. Well,
they also had a leak. Saul, we're out of time, but we also had a leak of this information to CNN and then the New York Times. I mean, someone's leaking somewhere, and I don't like that at all. That's others were focused on that. That's a federal crime in and of itself. That's a crime to leak grand jury proceedings. If that's what ended up happening, correct? Yeah, we're out of time, unfortunately. Saul Weisenberg, thank you so much. Pat Buchanan up next. People don't think about Hillsdale College as, impacting K-12 education, but I'm here to tell you it does, and it's fantastic. Guess what? Hillsdale has helped found more than a dozen charter schools nationwide. They all do it for free. It's called the Barney Charter School Initiative, funded entirely by donors, and what you know is that in K-12, you're going to get the same positive impact on kids as you see Hillsdale has on college students. Real character taught, real history, American history taught. None of this politically correct garbage that is filling our kids' minds. They'll understand what it means to be a good and meaningful, virtuous citizen. And these same teaching methods that we apply at the college level, many of them you could use at the lower school level as well, and that's what Hillsdale is doing. Go to lauraforhillsdale.com. A video there will show you how Hillsdale is building character in children all across the country and is teaching young people how to live full and really flourishing human lives. That's what it's all about, the pursuit of happiness, freedom, independence. Just go to lauraforhillsdale.com. We do know what cards are now, and nothing has any relation in the 31-page indictment to his work as campaign manager of the Trump campaign. So the summary is about 3.5 pages, and it goes on, exhibits and so forth. It's classic money laundering, classic false statements, 18 U.S.C. 1001, that's the statute, conspiracy. This is the kind of work I did when I was a white-collar criminal defense attorney, and the indictment is a classic one. And is it good news for Trump? Of course, it's not good news for Trump to have a former campaign manager have to surrender himself to federal authorities. At the same time, it is not a smoking gun indictment that indicates any collusion between the Russian government and the Trump campaign to try to throw the election. And that has been at the center of the political firestorm that we saw unfolding almost the minute after Donald Trump was elected president, almost a year ago now. And they want him out. They've wanted him out from the beginning. The establishment does not want to give up power. This is what I'm going to talk about this tonight on the Ingraham Angle. The debut is at 11, I'm dating it, at 10 o'clock Eastern until 11. And we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk to John Kelly's our first guest, exclusive to the Ingraham Angle. And we're going to talk to him about Trump's leadership style. Does this get them off their policy game here? They got to do tax reform. Is this going to distract them from their agenda? So we'll talk to him about this and a lot more. Joining us now, though, is Pat Buchanan. Pat Buchanan, of course, a inspiration to me, plays a central role in the populist movement that I recount in my new New York Times bestseller, Billionaire at the Barricades. Pat was very nice to mention this in a recent column. And this fight on the right that we've seen brewing really since almost the end of the Reagan administration, really, up until present day. The establishment doesn't want to give up power. And their gnashing of teeth, Pat, the wailing, oh no, they want Trump in an orange jumpsuit. Let's face it. Pat, great to talk to you.
Good to talk with you, Laura.
So what do you make of this Mueller indictment of Manafort and his associate, his deputy, Richard Gates? There's, money laundering, conspiracy, false statements. Looks like they were...
I thought the investigation was supposed to be about collusion between Trump and Putin. And what they've done is they've taken a campaign manager who was with Trump for 3 months and apparently gone back all the way to 2012 or 2010, 2011, and indicted him for income tax evasion and things like that. So what it tells me is that after a year of investigation, or more than that by the FBI, and many, many months by Mr. Mueller, they haven't got it. They have not found the smoking gun, as you mentioned, on the collusion between Trump and Vladimir Putin. And so I think that, I think this is going to be something of a letdown to these folks, but they have covered up the far more interesting stuff that went on last week as to who was putting together this plot to destroy Donald Trump during the primaries and general election.
Yeah, on the first half hour of the show, we didn't even mention that because we were going through the indictment. But, of course, whether it's the sale of our uranium to Russia or the, other outrages perpetrated in this
the fellows
fusion
at the
GPS.
Free Beacon seem to have had a role here.
Yeah, Pat, I saw that and I thought of you.
Singer.
I saw that and I thought of you because we have this Free Beacon, which is a neoconservative...
Little neocon magazine was spending a tremendous amount of money, apparently financed by one of our Republican oligarchs, to dig up dirt on Donald Trump for about 6 or 8 months. They should write something up on that and show the kids how democracy works in this great republic.
This is your democracy on globalism. Well, Pat, I think that again the establishment saw the distinct possibility back and during the campaign that Donald Trump might win the nomination. So of course the globalists in the Republican Party, the old neoconservatives who never met a war, they didn't want to send someone else to fight, they were just enraged at the idea that this guy was getting so much airtime in 2015 and then into 2016. They didn't want to debate him on the issues because they knew that the issues, that from trade to immigration to these foreign wars, they were on Trump's side. People were on Trump's side. They didn't want to debate the issues. They wanted to destroy him personally. So they began this Oppo research investment through the multi-billionaire Paul Singer, and then they ultimately dropped it, and then it was picked up by Hillary and the DNC.
Hillary and the DNC, and apparently about something like was either $9 to $11 million. Not all of it went through that DNC law firm to this Fusion GPS, and they hire this British spy who's got ties to the KGB and FSB and the FBI, and they're digging up all these dirt, and they mix it with lies, and then they bring it back, and our FBI is considering hiring Michael Steele, the spy. I mean, there are big questions on this, Laura, and I hope they're going to get into them. Was this dossier in the dirt this fellow got from the Russians, was that sent to the FBI, passed on to the White House, and used for unmasking the phone calls of Trump, used for beginning the big investigation into Trump and all the rest of it? And what the Russians, I saw Mark Stein, he had a good line. He said, everybody seems to have colluded with the Russians but Trump.
Yeah, the neocons, you got the Hillary, you got the DNC.
And Hillary hand in hand.
Yeah, so again, the question is, Bob Mueller was FBI director when all of these things were happening with the Uranium One, and he was FBI director then. So the question is, if you're going to do a big Russia collusion investigation, and you're going to apparently bring to light everything related to the investigation that you discover that could be criminal, then how can he actually oversee this part of the investigation? He has a conflict of interest on this.
Well, he has a real conflict of interest if you go back to the Uranium One deal. There's no doubt about it. He was head of the FBI then. But James Comey was head of the FBI when Steele was doing all this stuff with the Russians, and then they were feeding the material to the FBI. And then apparently the FBI offered Steele money to continue working for them. So you got, I mean, this is the guy who is investigating Trump and also working with a guy who's in touch with the Russians and working with them. This thing stinks to high heaven, and you haven't got all the dots connected yet. But what was the basis for those FISA warrants that were issued, you know, to look into Donald Trump's people? And what was the basis of unmasking all the phone calls with all Trump's people with the Russians? I mean, the real connection here, it seems to me we're getting to, we haven't connected all the dots, is between the Steele, the Russians, the KGB and FSB agents, and then the FBI and what went to the White House.
Well, do we know if the FBI paid any money for this information?
I don't think they did. There's talk about it, that they offered to have Steele continue working for them. I've seen it published. You know, I don't have obviously the facts on it, but there's been a lot of good work by a lot of journalists. Some of them in the Washington Times and elsewhere have done a great job.
By the way, Pat, we're talking to Pat Buchanan here on the Laura Ingraham Show. John Boehner spoke over the weekend to Politico, and he just went on a tear against talk radio. He doesn't mention me by name, but he blasts, of course, Hannity, Mark Levin, Limbaugh, and he said basically that, you know, they want to whip people up into this frenzy, and they're not really, you know, he said, I always liked Limbaugh. When I went to Palm Beach, I would meet with Rush and would play golf. But you know, who was that right-wing Mark Levin? He went crazy, and he got a big audience. He dragged Sean Hannity to the dark side. He dragged Rush to the dark side. And these guys, I used to talk to them all the time, and suddenly they're beating the living blank out of me. And he said, I had a conversation with Hannity beginning in 2015. I called him and I said, listen, you're nuts. We had a really blunt conversation. And then it was better for a few months, and then it went back to the same old, because I wasn't going to be a right-wing idiot. That's
well,
what
I
John
think
Boehner
Boehner's
said.
probably, pretty angry at his departure and the real beating he took up to that departure. But these are really, quite frankly, Laura, I think are the results of, there's a real internal struggle going on inside the Republican Party, and at bottom it is about policy, it's about the agenda, it's about the future, and it's about the character and nature of the GOP. And as I wrote last week, you know, on some issues like immigration now and open borders and globalization and free trade and federal deficits and wars, and just like they're working up the one now on Iran, you can see it in D.C. All of these things, there's an enormous part of the Republican coalition that is more Trumpian on those issues. On other issues like judges and justices, we all agree. On tax cuts, we agree. We might disagree on where. But on these issues, there's real division. And it's, you know, you can go back in American history, go in the 19th century, you can see the tariff wars and the battles over slavery and things like that. And that's what's taken place, and what's embittering so much of our politics is what's underneath it all.
People try to make it about personality or how much Trump tweets, but what's really going on, if you really want to, again, pull the curtain back, is there is a real substantive divide, and has been really for decades, within the GOP on some fundamental issues that turns out haven't worked out so well for the regular people, has made their life better. It's made their life worse. And Donald Trump was elected to turn over the apple cart and try to reset things so policies work better for the average person and they return more power to those people. That's what he said in his inaugural address. I want to take power and give it back to you.
Well, you know, you mentioned in your book, see, at the end of the Cold War, the great East-West struggle where we were all basically united inside the GOP and the conservative movement, that great coalition sort of came apart in our campaign in '92 and '96, Buchanan campaign. They hit these new issues about trade deficits. We've got to start looking out, quote, for America first. And you got to worry, the mass immigration and the illegal immigration walking across the border, changing the character of the country. People are getting angry. They don't want NAFTA. They don't want GATT. They don't want the WTO for China. And it was not a majority. It didn't get a majority in the GOP, but Trump seized upon these issues, recognized it was in touch with what the American people were thinking and feeling, and those numbers were growing to the point where, good heavens, even Hillary Clinton was trashing NAFTA and the TPP.
So did Obama. And you know what, Pat, before we let you go, John Boehner seems to think, again, this is all personal, that people are just angry for the sake of being angry. No, what people resented is that the party turned on the people. The party started treating average working class people as if they were the servants. And it's supposed to be the other way around. Government is supposed to be the servant of the people. And so John Boehner can huff and puff and blow his house down. But the bottom line is people just wanted a different set of policies. They didn't like these policies. But the establishment still doesn't get that, Pat. They still think these policies have a constituency.
That's what I don't understand. They don't get it. You could see the force of these issues rising and growing and developing. And the immigration issue in 2007, the whole country rose up and said no to amnesty. When Obama was going to bomb Syria or take us to war with Syria, they rose up and said no. I just don't understand the elites. I can understand how you can start to get out of touch, but they lost touch totally. And quite frankly, they seem almost unwilling to address the fundamental concerns of an enormous part of their constituency that Donald Trump walked away with.
If Donald Trump goes away tomorrow, Pat, this populist movement continues.
I think it's going to. The Republican Party's going to have to reconcile itself to it.
Yeah, they're going to have to do more for the people, and it's not just big business or big media or big universities you want to please. It's the regular people who pay the bills. Pat Buchanan, just the best. Thank you so much for joining us. When we come back, we'll close out this hour as Mueller makes his first stand. We have a great country. We are so blessed to live in this country. We could be living in countries where we can't speak our mind. We don't have a constitutional, God-given right to self-defense, where we are living in fear of just exercising our religion. But we have freedom here. We have freedom to hold leaders accountable. We have freedom to speak our mind. I'll be doing that every night on the Ingraham Angle. Tune in tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern on Fox News. Well, we've had a chance to glance through this 31-page tour de force indictment against Paul Manafort, and Pete Williams from NBC is absolutely right. These transactions predate Paul Manafort's involvement with the campaign, and Paul Manafort's going to have to answer these charges, and his associate, Rick Gates, is going to have to do the same thing. They're innocent until proven guilty, but the charges are laid out. Money laundering, 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, false statements, failure to register as a foreign agent. Under the foreign agent statute, federal statute, you have to do that when you're representing a foreign government. So this seems to be the classic white-collar prosecution of an individual who allegedly was concealing payments for work he did working overseas for the Ukrainian interests, and apparently not wanting to pay taxes on it. So it's tax fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy to conceal these transactions, and false statements to the government. And the idea that this is a bad day for Trump because it in any way alludes to a collusion with Russia, you've got to be living on another planet if you think that. It's just not what this is about. And maybe it's an attempt, as Salt Weisenberg said earlier on the show, who was a deputy counsel for Ken Starr during the Whitewater-Lewinsky investigation. He said, now this is a classic attempt to twist Manafort and put the big squeeze on him and Gates, try to get them to give something up on Trump. They don't have anything on Trump. If they had something on Trump, that would be the indictment today. They would have something on Kushner or any of these other characters, but they don't. And so they go for Manafort and Gates. So we'll see. I mean, we don't know anything more than we see in these 31 pages, but as far as a smoking gun that in any way casts aspersions on Donald Trump, it's a nothing burger. and I hate that word, nothing burger, but just vis-a-vis Trump, it's not. Look, I'm not saying Donald Trump wants Paul Manafort to get indicted, or this is good for Trump. It's not good for Trump, but it's a nothing. You know what? You know what is something? The fact that Donald Trump and the Republicans are about to accomplish something big vis-a-vis tax reform. So I understand the president's frustration. He tweeted out, just as we're on the cusp of doing tax reform, this all starts, percolating. There's a leak, which itself is a real problem. Over the weekend, this information leaked out of the grand jury proceedings because, remember, the grand jury has to hand down the indictment. The grand jury's been deliberating both in the Eastern District of New York and in Washington, D.C. They have two grand juries going on. It is the grand jury's responsibility to hand down an indictment. The prosecutor puts the case on, but the grand jury has to ultimately indict. And that's what happened. And so, but it leaked. Now, it is a federal crime to leak information during a grand jury proceeding. And yet CNN and the New York Times seems to have its sources, and BuzzFeed too, for that matter. I love Andy McCarthy's point on this. This was a couple of days ago before they even came down with this indictment. Have you noticed that we're no longer talking merely about the Trump dossier? Since the Washington Post's startling revelation this week that the dossier was commissioned and paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC, there's been a subtle tweak in the coverage. Now reports allude to the research that led to the Trump dossier. That's on this Fusion GPS story that we've learned more and more about over the last 2 weeks especially. Namely that Hillary Clinton and the DNC spent millions of dollars combined to gather this information from a British spy who had FSB and KGB sources in Russia. That information ultimately gathered, presented to Hillary and the DNC in order to do what? Affect the outcome of the election, namely to smear Donald Trump personally and remove any sense that he could be president of the United States, any possibility that he would get elected. And then when he was elected, that information was delivered to the FBI and then presented to President Obama and incoming President Trump. So the big question now is, was this Russia-generated information used to justify ongoing surveillance during a political election year of the Trump campaign? That's the stunning question. That's the issue we need the real smoking gun on. You know what the smoking gun will reveal? Well, the smoking gun on this is the bank records. We need the real bank records, the transactions, because I bet my bottom dollar that someone ain't telling the truth about not knowing the provenance of these documents, namely that the Kremlin created this dossier. Kremlin sources, people close to the Kremlin, created this information about Donald Trump's lurid, gross, and false. And they did it because they wanted to help Hillary. Curry favor with Hillary, just like they were currying favor with Hillary when Bill got the $500,000 speaking engagement. So the collusion, not borne out in this indictment, but I'll tell you, smells like collusion in the reporting on the Fusion GPS story and on the Uranium One deal. So collusion everywhere. Everybody seems to be colluding with the Russians except Donald Trump, as far as I could tell. 855-40-LAURA. Okay, what do y'all want me to talk about tonight? I'm just looking for ideas for my show. I don't really have anything planned yet, so I'm hoping that you guys, I'm just teasing. I do want your ideas, by the way, for the Ingraham angle. Every night, 10 p.m. Eastern on the Fox News channel, and today's our first show. So I thought I would bring on, do like a puppet segment with two puppets discussing politics, because we can't really get some big guests. So, a puppet representing the establishment and then a puppet representing the populist movement. And they would carry on a very interesting show for an hour. And I would chime in and I'd try to moderate between the puppets. Maybe we can get Raymond, are the old Sound of Music goat herd puppets still, are they in the Smithsonian? Whatever happened to those?
I think they're at a garage sale in Austria somewhere. I don't know. Richard Rogers' estate probably
I
sold
love the
them.
Mother goat herd. Remember, she go, Remember that?
With those big eyelashes.
Yeah, no, I love the goat herd puppets. But this is the crazy stuff that goes through my mind when I'm getting ready for a show. Wouldn't it be fun?
You actually do have a nice string of guests.
Oh, okay. Well, I talk about that. I have General John Kelly. He's my first guest.
In an exclusive.
A Fox News exclusive. It's not, by the way, an exclusive in cable news. It's not an exclusive in prime time. It's not an exclusive in a show that runs at 10 p.m. It's an exclusive, period. Okay? You know how people do that? It's an exclusive. First cable No, I am exclusive. So he's going to be joining us. Also, former Attorney General Mike Mukasey is going to chime in on this indictment. Now, we spent millions and millions and millions of dollars in a special prosecutor's office, special prosecutor unaccountable to the people, have no accountability. I think the whole thing is unconstitutional. I'm sorry. If people are saying the chief executive can't fire the special prosecutor, even though it's in the executive branch, then who is he accountable to? Congress? Not really. I mean, Congress wants to give him more power. Remember, I think it's Lindsey Graham and Flake.
They voted to protect him. To
they
give
want to
him
protect
more
him.
protection from the West Wing.
They want him to have even more power in Washington to go through everybody's tax files. Like, you think Paul Manafort's happy that he decided to sign up for that Trump campaign? He's clearly, if he hadn't signed up to work for Trump, he'd just be back in East Hampton enjoying himself. But you sign up to work for Trump, and you get a microscope on your life. And, well, he's going to have to answer these charges. But, I mean, a prosecutor, like, I talked to Brendan Sullivan at our launch party for the Ingraham angle. Remember, he represented Ollie North in 1987 during the big Iran-Contra investigation. And he said, look, if they want to indict someone, they're going to indict someone. If a bunch of prosecutors get together and they have a limitless budget and a limitless supply of potential targets, somebody will get indicted. That's just how it works. People think, oh, well, they're following the facts where they lead them. They're about truth, justice, and the American way. No. They're about indicting people. That's what they do. Prosecutors want to indict people. That means people look at them and say, oh, aren't you doing a good job? You're indicting people. Oh, okay. Well, if that's the way you like your government to run, but if you're a special prosecutor, you don't have really any accountability for the way you spend money, resources, your prosecutorial discretion, which is already given a wide berth in the federal court system. Is, you basically get carte blanche, do whatever you want. So we're going to talk to Mukasey about that, Judge Mukasey, and other special guests. And during the week, we have other we have other surprises and exclusives. A primetime exclusive, the Ingraham angle. And what do you want to hear me talk about? I'm going to get into all of this. Obviously. This is the area of law I used to practice. So I used to practice white collar criminal defense. And you know what's odd? I was just thinking about this. When my show on MSNBC launched in, I think it was late August or early September 1998, believe it or not. It was called Watch It, and it was 9 a.m. in the morning. The night before the show launch, Ken Starr's report was handed down. So the big independent counsel's report to Congress. So I had like tabs. It went on for hundreds of pages. I had tabs and dog ear, and I was folding pages over. And the same thing, this show launches an indictment. It's just weird. Isn't that a weird coincidence? Special counsel, independent counsel, the eve or the day of the show. It's weird. It's a weird coincidence. So what do you all want me to talk about? John Boehner's apparently drinking a lot still. He's smoking cigarettes and trashing the populace.
And ironing his own shirts, we learned.
Oh, what an regular guy. Again, I told you, when he used to come on the show, I've always liked Boehner. I mean, you can't help but like him. But what I don't like is that he doesn't seem to understand that the old guard, the populace, it's over for them. He was just trashing talk radio, trashing Hannity. Like, he didn't trash me. He didn't trash me.
No, he didn't.
He left me out of the list.
He just hit the boys.
He hit the boys, not me at all.
But I love this. There is no Republican Party. He says there is, but what does it even mean? Donald Trump's not a Republican. He's not a Democrat. He's a populist. He doesn't have an ideological bone in his body. There is nobody. There's nobody there.
Because he's gone. Because he's gone, there's nobody there. John Boehner is but remember all the stuff he said about talk radio, and it's so hard. We can't do immigration reform. It's so hard. For a guy from Ohio, a working class guy, man, he has a way of elbowing the regular people, doesn't he?
Well, and your conjecture that the right and left is really all the same. The establishment on the right and the establishment on the left.
Out. This is Billionaire at the Barricades. Get my book, guys, because everything that's happening, from Mueller to Boehner to the fight on the right on immigration and trade, it is all explained, and in my personal narrative is woven through the whole book. Got to get this book. It tells the whole story. It's like a whodunit.
He talks about himself. John Boehner tells Politico he and George W. Bush are like two peas in the same pod. And he relates a text. They were texting back and forth.
I hate these populists. They're mean-spirited.
So 43 says, hey, you talking to Ryan? Are you giving him advice? I said, yeah, if he calls, I give him advice. Boehner takes a long, satisfied drag. He texts me back. He says he should call you more.
He should call you more. Ryan's still a little wet behind the ears, you know.
Fixing the lawnmower.
It's some cruelty in the way the Republicans are those talk radio people. I never went on talk radio.
Casual cruelty.
Casual cruelty. You know what's casually cruel is to deindustrialize the whole Midwest. That was casually cruel. But they're mad because they're losing power. And on the Ingraham angle, every night, I'm going to hold people accountable. And that means you, Mr. President. Everybody who's in power is held accountable to the people. And I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do it the best I can. And sometimes I'll make a mistake. But generally, I'm just going to call it as I see it. That's what you expect from me. I'm going to call it as I see it. And when Republicans screw up, I'll tell you about it. When Democrats are waging their resistance of absurdity, I'll explain why they're doing it. And a lot of things about the country we miss. We don't report. We underreport, or we misreport altogether. We're going to take a break. 855-40-LAURA. The Ingraham Angle debuts tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern on the Fox News Channel.
I've been telling you for weeks that we need men and women like you to enlist in a nationwide campaign to pressure Congress to pass tax cuts that we voted for when we elected Donald Trump to drain the swamp in D.C. Here's the good news. Hundreds of thousands of you have already gone to taxcutsnow.com and signed up. But we still need more signatures to ratchet up the pressure on Congress. The average tax cut under the Trump plan is over $4,000 per family. That may not be real money in Washington, but it's real money to you. Money you can spend on the things you care about. If you haven't signed on yet, please take less than a minute to join our cause and then share the link to taxcutsnow.com with your family, friends, church members, and coworkers. Send a message to Washington that business as usual will not cut it. Senator McConnell and Speaker Ryan need to hear from you loud and clear. You want your tax cuts, and you want them now. Not next year, this year. Go to taxcutsnow.com. That's taxcutsnow.com.
Leaking information from a grand jury, no big deal, as long as it's hurting Donald Trump. 855-40-LAURA, Billionaire at the Barricades, now a New York Times bestseller. Get your copy where books are sold. And tonight, The Ingraham Angle, 10 p.m. Eastern on the Fox News Channel. Let's go to Donald in Washington. Donald, go ahead, my friend.
Yes, good morning. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll say that. Hey, I just sounded a little curious that we were hearing all of this about the FBI informant with a gag order, and then they removed the gag order. He was supposed to testify to Congress, and then all of a sudden, West Bingo indictment on Manafort. Just a little curious.
Yeah, well, this is going to be up to the Justice Department to remove any hindrance or prohibition from this individual from speaking to Congress. That must be done. Again, this is why Jeff Sessions should never have recused himself from anything. I mean, this doesn't relate to the Russia investigation per se, so I don't see why he couldn't just say, you're free to testify.
The president just responded on Twitter. Sorry, but this was years ago before Paul Manafort was part of the Trump campaign. And why aren't crooked Hillary and the Dems the focus? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark.
Well, it doesn't surprise me one bit. And Donald Trump is right. We have a system of special prosecutors that ends up criminalizing politics, a rank attempt to undo the election and to nullify your vote. That's what's happening. I mean, Ed Woodson's going to step in because we have a lot to do today just because it's our first show, but I'm really delighted he's here to take over the reins from me. And the Ingraham Angle again tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern Time on the Fox News Channel. General Kelly will be my exclusive guest. Remember to stay with us and DVR the show if you're not able to watch it live. DVR the show. Let's just face it, we want to destroy MSNBC night after night. Forget CNN's not even a factor anymore.
Hello, America. This is Edward Woodson. I'm sitting in for the Laura Ingraham show today, and I just want to say this from the outset. I know you're expecting Laura for the rest of the show. Laura has been gracious enough to allow me to sit in for her. It is truly an honor and a privilege to be here, to sit in this chair. One of the greatest of all time. By the way, her new Fox show premieres tonight, The Ingraham Angle. Make sure you tune in, 10 o'clock tonight. I'm sure she's very excited for that. So without any further ado, that was Karen Finney talking about it doesn't really matter who paid for Fusion GPS. The one thing that we have come to realize about, because we've heard about collusion for how long now? A year. It's been a year now. We've heard of collusion and Russia. And now we find out that the actual collusion that was going on was everybody. Everybody was colluding against the president. Before he was president, and of course we've seen after, there has been a concerted effort of collusion by everyone. I mean, if you think about it, look, it started out with, Paul Singer, neocon, with the Washington Free Beacon. But no, it did not end there. And then after that, it was picked up by the DNC, by the Democrats. Everyone pretty much had their hands in this. And I want to talk about this, but first we've got a guest. We've got Sean Davis. He's the co-founder of the Federalist. Sean, are you there?
I'm here.
You just wrote a piece here in the Federalist. I want you to go into that, but essentially the Obama campaign paid $972,000 to the law firm that secretly paid Fusion GPS in 2016. I want you to go into that.
Right. So what we learned last week was that the Democrats were actually instrumental in paying for this debunked and unverified dossier of salacious allegations against Trump, namely Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC. And we found that out because under threat of subpoena, Fusion GPS had its attorney, or an attorney who was funding it, Mark Elias with Perkins Coie, come out and say, okay, I fess up. I lied to the press for a year about this, but it was totally me. I was the bag man for the money. I'm the one who paid off Fusion GPS. So I went and looked into the Obama campaign's campaign finance filings from 2016, and you may be asking yourself, well, Obama wasn't running in 2016. He didn't have a campaign. He did. He had a campaign arm. He had it since 2012. It was doing all kinds of things for him. And if you go in and look at those records, you find a whole bunch of entries that total up about $972,000 paid to that exact same firm that paid off Fusion GPS since April 2016 when Fusion GPS was hired. And at the same time, the attorney who fessed up to the Post that, yeah, he was the bag man for Fusion at Perkins Coie, he was Obama for America's attorney. So there are a lot of connections here that raise a whole lot of questions about what Obama's people knew, when they knew it, and what they did with what they knew.
It really is. It's astounding to see the level of collusion, but the collusion wasn't going on with Donald Trump and the campaign. It was going on with pretty much everyone else, right?
Well, what's interesting, if you read the actual, famous Steele dossier that started this whole Mueller thing, all the investigation, the collusion charges, it relied heavily on informants within the Kremlin. This guy, Christopher Steele, was hired by Fusion GPS to go dig up dirt on Trump and Russia, and what he ended up doing instead was actually paying off Russian government sources to tell him things about Trump. Now I look at that. I look at the history of Fusion GPS, which has done all kinds of unregistered lobbying and PR work for foreign governments. I see Fusion GPS working with the guy who's paying off Russians to say things that Steele himself in court admitted he couldn't verify. So there's a whole lot of funny business going on, and there seems to be plenty to go around rather than existing entirely on one side.
Also, it's come out that the FBI actually picked up the tab for some of the Steele dossier and paid for Steele's travel and expenses. This stinks to high heaven.
I would love to know specifically what they paid for. Did they pay for him to go to Russia? Did money he got from the FBI, was that used to pay off these Russian Kremlin informants who may have been just pushing blatant misinformation to the U.S.? Unfortunately, we don't have answers to that because the FBI, for some reason, is stonewalling multiple congressional investigations into what they were actually doing with the dossier and its author.
Well, if there was collusion, there's certainly collusion enough to go around. I would tend to argue that the least amount of collusion was going on with the Trump campaign. And look, let's be honest here. This whole indictment today, we spent Laura spent the first part of the show talking about this Manafort indictment. The Manafort indictment is nothing more than a diversion. A diversion to divert your attention away from all this stuff that came out last week. That's what this is. I mean, it's obvious to anyone that's paying attention, right?
Well, it's interesting. There were 12 counts in the Manafort indictment, and there were a bunch of alleged misdeeds listed. And from my read, a lot of them were very serious, but there was some information in that indictment about Manafort's alleged illegal foreign lobbying for foreign governments. And it mentions Company A and Company B, that he was running money through and directing to do a lot of this foreign lobbying work on his behalf. And so I have a lot of questions about who those companies were. One of them looks like it may have been Podesta Group, run by John Podesta's brother, Tony. John Podesta was the head of Hillary Clinton's campaign. So I think there are a lot more shoes to drop in the story, and I don't think any side is going to come out of this thing looking sparkly clean.
Except for the president. I mean, if you think about it, who in the president's administration was involved in any of this? I see no one. I mean, look, if you want to talk about Manafort, Manafort was with the campaign for a short period of time, 3 months, and what's being alleged here happened before he joined the campaign. In fact, these are old deeds. And that's what shows me that it's being used pretty much to gain leverage and to have Manafort flip, right?
Well, we'll see. And there's something interesting in his indictment. There are several counts for undisclosed foreign lobbying related to the Foreign Agent Registration Act. That he was lobbying for foreign governments, he was taking money from foreign governments, and he was not disclosing that he was doing any of that. You're actually allowed to do that here. You can lobby for a foreign government.
Of course.
You just have to be open about it. And what we know, going back to Fusion GPS, this is a firm that has been accused of doing illegal lobbying on behalf of foreign governments, including Russia. So we'll know that this investigation is above board and is centered on finding and rooting out corruption on all sides if and when it goes after bad actors on the left that have done the same things that are being alleged of people on the right. If that happens, I'll be willing to look and say, okay, this thing was above board, everyone got hit. But if it turns out that only people on one side are getting hit for things that we know people on the other side were doing, it's going to be real interesting.
Well, it seems to me that everyone pretty much had their hands in this in terms of the Fusion GPS. I don't think there are any. Again, there are no clean hands here, except for, I think, frankly, this absolves the Trump administration. I mean, if you look at it, what's amazing to me is the collusion, frankly, between the establishment of the Republican Party. We saw this with Paul Singer and the Washington Free Beacon. They had this. They started it when Donald Trump became the nominee. They took it and they handed it off. I guess the DNC picked up on it, ran with it a little more. I don't see how the Trump administration is guilty of any kind of collusion. In fact, I think everyone but the Trump administration is guilty of collusion here. And what this shows is, look, this is what we have talked about. What Laura talks about. If you've listened to my show, this is what I've talked about. This proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is but one party system in this country. You see, we're led to believe that actually your voting means something and that there is, it matters. And I don't mean to say that it doesn't, but what I mean to say is that for the first time, in our history and in modern times at the very least, we have a president who is a true populist who was elected by the people of the United States. Think about this. What we are seeing now with Fusion GPS and how everyone had their fingers in this, what we're seeing, frankly, is the proof of collusion by everyone but the Trump campaign and the Trump administration. That's the way I see it.
Well, the way I look at it, I'm trying to go where the facts are with the investigation. So far, we've not seen any evidence from authorities or anyone otherwise that Donald Trump was personally colluding with anyone in Russia. But, I want to see the investigation play out. I want to see the facts come out. And hopefully, if this thing is above board, we're going to see people on both sides, including those connected to the Hillary campaign as well, getting gored. And if they don't, then we'll know that something was going on.
Well, I'm not going to hold my breath, frankly. I mean, I think this is this indictment by the FBI is nothing more, I think, than a fishing expedition. It is a way to put pressure on Paul Manafort. Look, they have had heavy-handed tactics with this whole investigation, especially in regards to Paul Manafort. Showing up at his house unannounced. All that was unnecessary. And what it does, it's psychological. What it does is, and this is what the feds do. This is what they're good at. Putting pressure on someone so that they flip. That's how they work their cases. And so, they're going to expect, some type of, information coming from Manafort. And I don't think that Manafort has any information, frankly, because I don't think there was collusion, on the part of the Trump campaign. But there certainly was collusion by everyone else. So that's kind of the way I see it, Sean.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I want to see how this trial plays out. I want to see some meat on the bones of these allegations, and then I'll plan on just taking it from there.
All right. Well, listen, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it, Sean.
And always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
We will have you back soon. All right. We're going to take a little break, but make sure you tune in tonight to the Ingraham Angle at 10 p.m. live on Fox tonight. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, the Laura Ingraham Show. I know you're expecting Laura, but you got me today. I'm Edward Woodson. I'm sitting in for the Laura Ingraham Show. I am, frankly, I'm honored to be here. This is a great opportunity for me, and I just want to thank Laura for bringing me in, and the staff as well. I want to thank the staff. Everybody has been amazing here. So we're going to go to the phones. We're going to go. There's Pete calling from the great state of Florida, where I live. Pete, how are you? Pete, are you on the line?
I'm good. Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. You're on. You're on live. You're on live.
Hello.
You are on.
Okay. These leaks and these indictments were actually timed to get Uranium One and Fusion GPS stories out of the news cycle. And they started on Friday in order to get these two stories out of the Sunday talk shows. That was the whole reason why this whole thing started on Friday.
I could not agree with you more. I totally agree. I think this whole Manafort indictment is a way to diffuse from the situation, because the Russian narrative has been unraveling, frankly. And if you think about it, the Russian narrative has been unraveling since the beginning, but they keep trying to rehabilitate it, right? They try to bring it back again all the time. It's funny because I was watching the Sunday news shows, and you're right. And all they wanted to talk about, rather than the indictment, was they want to bring it back to Russia and the collusion and the Russian narrative. But the thing is, it's falling apart. And so I agree with you. I think you're right about that. All right. Thanks a lot for calling, Pete. Appreciate it. We're going to go with Jim from Florida. Jim, you've been on the line for a while. Thanks for holding. Thanks for your patience. What do you have to say?
No problem, Ed. What is funny about this whole situation with Manafort being indicted, he could have been indicted years ago when this really happened, when he was under indictment with Comey. But no, they found out now is you got more people talking about the collusion with Hillary Clinton. He knew he was fixing to be out of a job because he's part of that. He knew that, so he had to get something done, and he's going to bring that up now because it could keep him in his job, which is wrong all the way around because he's part of this whole collusion with Russia, even though he's saying that this guy had something to do with the Democrats is wrong.
Oh, you're absolutely right. In fact, this goes back to 2012. 2012, they could have indicted a long time ago, but they didn't. You're right. They've been waiting on this. Look, this indictment is just being used to try to flip Manafort. That's what it is. It's obvious. It's obvious. So, all right. Well, thanks for calling, Jim. I appreciate it. All right. We are going to go on a quick break right now, but make sure tonight, 10 o'clock, tune in. Laura Ingraham, the Ingraham Angle, tonight at 10 o'clock. We'll be right back.
With a big credit bureau data breach making the news recently, it's only natural to be worried that you're one of the 145 million people